Welcome to the Movement Upgraded podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jen Hosler, licensed physical therapist and certified strength and mobility coach. Here you can expect to hear about all things movement. The Movement Upgraded podcast is a blend of the science of strength training, rehab, and mobility, mixed with the personal and professional experience to provide you with the steps you need to keep your body pain-free and moving well, so you can do what you love forever. Welcome back to another episode of the Movement Upgraded podcast. Today we're going to really talk about some tangible things. They're not exactly tangible because they really have to do with our brain and our mindset and our thoughts and our personality traits and how we really cope with stress and pain. But it's really going to help you leave with some very actionable things and some things to think about and hopefully some tools that you can utilize in your life from here on out. Because if you're a human, you're going to experience pain. That's just part of a human experience. It's normal. And I think that having a healthy dose of not fear, but of attention to pain is important. But I do think that everything is kind of two ends of a spectrum. We have the super afraid of pain at one end of the spectrum where we're just any pain, we automatically think the worst. WebMD tells you you're pregnant or dying. The internet does not help with this. And then we have the other end of the spectrum where I usually see this in the fitness industry. We'll have these nagging things in our bodies or whatever that start out and we can ignore them. And then maybe they progress into, they're there all the time, but we can basically combat them with some foam rolling, some ibuprofen, something like that. Then they continue to get worse until we're I can't really move anymore. And this happens a lot in the fitness industry because we push through things and ignore our bodies because we see how resilient they are. And maybe it's not this pain all the time, but it's just when we're exercising, we feel a little pinching in our hip and we're pushing through it and whatever, and it starts to get worse, but we're able to ignore it until then all of a sudden it's not just when we're squatting and now my hip pinches all the time and now my hip feels really stuck and it's just really uncomfortable, and then it starts waking me up at night. Those are kind of the typical progression of somebody in the fitness industry or somebody who just ignores their body because they don't recognize that pain and little nagging things are sometimes just our body's way of communicating, hey, something needs to change or let's check things out. It doesn't even also always mean that it's movement related and you need to stretch something or strengthen something. Sometimes it means we need to look at everything in the realm of you as a human. So that's that biopsychosocial model. So all of that to be said, we have two ends of the spectrum when it comes to pain, and I would like us to be able to fall in the middle where if we have pain or a nagging thing that flares up, instead of going to worst case scenario, we sit and think, okay, what's going on? And we stop, we pause, we get a bird's eye view, we zoom out in our recent lives and we figure out what has happened and what can we address and what needs to be addressed. You can't always do this on your own, by the way. This is what I do with my clients and patients. Sometimes they come in thinking that they're just going to do a bunch of exercises and I just need to get the right program and they just need to tackle that thing. But really the deep inner work is what we need to do at looking at their life and looking at their what we call allostatic load or life stressors. And we adjust those. And sometimes just understanding that a life event created this flare up, sometimes that's really helpful because then we can know it'll get better in the future. So all of that to be said, I wanted to come on to this podcast episode to help you navigate that, right? To help you not have so much of an emotional response to pain, and to be able to understand that there are some personality traits that actually will help you cope better when or if you experience any sort of chronic pain issue. So this is specifically going to be a great podcast for somebody who is a clinician, works with people who are in chronic pain, or if you are in chronic pain yourself, we're going to talk a lot about a new paradigm in understanding chronic pain. And I came across this research article that's called Resilience, a New Paradigm for Adaptation to Chronic Pain. And this was in I believe a headache journal, which is interesting. But I really, really liked the research article because it takes everything from a really zoomed out perspective and looks at people's ability to cope with chronic pain and basically be resilient when when they experience pain, and experience pain as just kind of part of their lives, like it comes and goes or it's always there. And it really talks about those who are able to not let pain take over their lives, versus those who may experience like more severe pain, or the flare-ups are worse, or it really affects their lives. And so pain is like a stressor, and being resilient just kind of means being able to tolerate and adapt to stressors. And some people are great at adapting to it, and they can kind of tackle the pain and they can get better, and maybe the pain will start to dissipate and they'll be able to manage it on their own way better. Or there are people who kind of go the opposite direction and it takes over their lives. And this is not to say that if you are the latter, this is your fault by any means. Our society is just kind of not set up to help you understand your body and understand pain and how complex it really is. And we have a lot of people in a power dynamic relationship with you or with their patients or clients. So I'm looking at like healthcare providers, surgeons, physical therapists, even trainers, anybody who has that like power dynamic where you're asking for advice and help from them. They don't realize the power of their words. And we talked about this in movement school specifically, which is how we went all the way down this rabbit hole of pain science that I found this paper. And I loved it so much because this has been my experience with chronic pain. So if you listen to episode, I believe number 3, I talked a lot about my injuries and a little bit about my chronic pain that I dealt with. But I have had some sort of pain or issues with my body since I was in high school. And I finally have gotten to a point in my life where I really understand how to manage those things. And I am not in pain more often than I am, which is fantastic. And I share a lot of the tools that I've learned with you. But a lot of what I have learned and have had to adapt and how I've had to adjust my mindset and how I think about and how I approach when pain happens. A lot of that has to do with learning. So I've had the privilege of going into a career that helped me. So I will note that, like, I can understand this. I have access to this. And because of that, I actually created this podcast and do what I do because I want more people to have access to this information and understand it. But a lot of that had to do with the things that the mindset shift that I have had into, instead of taking kind of more of a victim mindset, which is so easy to do. And I did this in the very beginning. I really had to learn different ways of coping and different ways of addressing and thinking about the pain that I was experiencing. And because of all of that, I really try to give the tools that I've learned to my clients and my patients. And this paper that I came across actually kind of conceptualized what I had already learned. So you can call this 100% a confirmation bias. I am by no means sharing this paper as like, this is the end, the way, the truth, the life, right? Because very much research can be, let me find something that confirms what I believe. This kind of did that for me, but I really, really enjoy the information it provided, and it took a conglomeration of a lot of different studies to provide just like a new paradigm and way of thinking, which are just all the things I love. So you can take this with a grain of salt if you would like. I am going to link this article in the podcast notes for you so you can go read and dissect it yourself if you would like to, because there's a lot of really good stuff in there. What I'm personally specifically going to highlight today are the personality, they call them key personality resources, which are just like personality traits that are considered resilience resources for anybody experiencing chronic pain. So what that means is we're looking at the idea of resilience, which is just your ability to deal with stress. And this is something that they look at, I believe, from a child development world. So these are kind of borrowed from psychology a little bit, which I believe is really where a lot of the magic happens with chronic pain. It's definitely integrating all of the biopsychosocial, right? And sometimes in physical therapy, when we have pain, we have so removed those things from each other. We just think that the brain and psychology is completely different from what you feel in your body. And we are so biomedical focused and thinking that if my shoulder hurts, I need an image to figure out what is wrong with my shoulder, and that's going to tell me why it hurts. And we really have not done a good job at understanding and helping our clients and patients understand that if my shoulder hurts, it is a complex thing. And my sensations are created as a multi system interaction between my sensory like sensations and how I move in my musculoskeletal system for sure, and then also my psychology and my emotions and my sense of stability and my ability to cope and deal with stress and resilience, essentially. So that is kind of where this paper comes from. And a lot of the way we think about pain doesn't really talk about how all of the other factors in our lives can address it or affect it, I should say. And then the other thing that I feel like, talk about with pain is we're so focused on avoiding it. We don't have, or I should say, I just haven't come across it. And that means that I've had to dig a little bit more for it, which I think means it's not as readily available. But of course, that's going to differ for everybody. But I think understanding how to cope with and deal with pain is missing. That's like a missing link. And what I mean by that is when we go through pain, because we're all going to experience it at some point, way, shape, or form, I think we're so focused on fixing that and escaping the discomfort and taking NSAIDs or taking medication and resting and rice, which is no longer supported by the evidence, by the way, and all of these things that are to escape the actual discomfort. And I don't mean we should sit here with our pain, but I think that oftentimes just understanding that the pain will go away because the future, like everything is temporary, and understanding that it's okay to have a little bit of pain to a certain extent, right? There's going to be certain things that we'll want to check out, but like that can very much change the severity, like how severe the pain is, and how long you're going to deal with it. And also it's going to affect like how much the pain affects the rest of your life, which is really what this paper kind of talks about. And instead of looking at somebody with chronic pain as like problematic, it's actually borrowing what are the people doing who have chronic pain, but they're able to like live lives that are not affected by their chronic pain so much. And I'll tell you, as somebody who has dealt with this like a lot, way more than anybody else will probably know, except Ryan, who lives with me, it's definitely something that is a huge shadow over you, and it changes and affects the rest of your life. And it's a really big stressor and challenger. Like it really challenges your ability to navigate the world. And if you're nodding your head because you're like, yes, I know, that's like me too. Solidarity here, like that is just, there's certain select populations that deal with pain more, and unfortunately if you're one of those that's like, yeah, that's me, it just kind of is what it is. And I stopped trying to fix myself and thinking there's something wrong with me. And in fact, I think the majority of the reason that I have so much pain, and a lot of other people do, is because we are living lives and we live in a society that we just have not adapted to live in. We weren't meant to work 40, 50 plus hours a week and just be like on the grind 24/7, in front of a computer 24/7, sitting a lot, just having so much to do. Like we really should be sitting around and like napping or like doing some movement, having more fun, maybe being a little bit productive, but like we've really switched gears and just obsessively became obsessed with like hustle and productivity and all of those things. And I just want you to know that you're not broken if you experience a lot of pain. And let's kind of chat about what ways you can create some healthier coping mechanisms, or what are some things that are really that are supported by research that are going to help you navigate that, right? That's what we're going to talk about. So in the study, they talked about the 3 personality resources. You can see I could talk about this all day long. And those 3 things were, number 1, optimism. And I'm not saying like toxic positivity, by the way. Like optimism is really important for overall well-being in general. So we'll talk about what that is in the future, but that's 1. 2 is going to be purpose in life, which is going to sound really woo. A lot of this is going to sound quote unquote woo-woo because we're not used to psychology and like all of these things, even though they really have profound effects on our health. And number 3 is going to be pain acceptance, which to me was the most fascinating of the 3. And I've really started to integrate this into some of the work that I do with the clients that have a lot of this type of pain. And let's kind of talk about what all three of those mean. So, number one is going to be optimism. And this really does not mean like constantly looking for the bright side of things, right? It really just means they actually defined more specifically a dispositional optimism in this paper, which talks about positive expectations for the future, even with uncertainty. So when you're going through like a pain flare up, for example, you may feel like really frustrated, but the more that you go through, the more you know that they're temporary. They always last a short amount of time. And actually, one of the ways that we look at progress in the rehab world, if you're dealing with chronic pain flare ups, is actually that they don't last as long, they're not as severe, or they don't happen as often. So when we are thinking about optimism, we just want to know that in the future things will get better, right? Positive outlook, positive regard for the future. This is really hard when you're in a significant amount of pain. It really is. But as you start to navigate things and pay attention, you may notice that you've already dealt with them and it does get better, right? And that's really important, is just understanding and trying to be like, okay, it's temporary and things could get better. I think things can almost always get better. It's just a matter of time and putting things together and finding the right resources, which there are so many out there. Sometimes we just have to keep searching. So that is optimism, right? The number two is going to be purpose in life. So this is woo-woo a little bit, but I think it really is important to have an understanding of your purpose and direction of your current and past lives. That's what they talk about in the paper. You need to have like goals and beliefs that give your life meaning, and have a high level of intention towards pursuing those goals. Now, if you're sitting here like, I don't really know any of that stuff and you're panicking, that's a great place to start. Like, I feel that a lot of people that I work with struggle to have any sense of meaning in their lives, or just like don't know what is purposeful. And you don't need to be doing some like really outstanding things. You just need to feel that you are purposeful, or that you even understand what that means for you. And a lot of people have not ever done this like self-reflection and introspection to know like what even matters to them, what are their values. And so if that's you, we probably just need to start there. Like, what matters to you? What's important? When do you feel like you're being purposeful? Just start to reflect on those things. I'm a big journaler. I love writing. It's how I process things. So maybe that's one way that you can do it. Maybe you need to talk to somebody. Very highly recommend finding a mental health therapist to help navigate this with you. That can be really helpful in this realm, which is why I refer out very often to helping people find psychologists and therapists, because sometimes we just need somebody to reflect back and talk about things and bridge the gap between things we wouldn't have, or made connections where we wouldn't have otherwise, or help increase our awareness, because sometimes we can only see tunnel vision of what we know, and there's so much more out there that we just didn't even realize. So a strong belief in like purpose in life actually is correlated to a higher pain tolerance. And they quoted another research article in this paper talking about how people who have a stronger belief in their purpose of life, there's like ways to measure that. I think there was a scale that they used, but those people who had a stronger belief in their purpose of life, they recovered faster from knee replacement surgery. So their recovery is faster. So that also might translate, I can't say this for sure because we don't have research to support it, but might translate in a faster recovery from a pain flare up, right? And so that's really something, to be honest. And that's kind of the link that they tied. But as I'm reading this, I'm like, yeah, that makes so much sense, right? They basically conceptualize a lot of what I experience in my own life and a lot of what I see with the clients that I work with who are in chronic pain. The third trait that was in this research article is pain acceptance. Now, this may seem like, if you are somebody who's in chronic pain and you feel like nobody understands, because they don't, if you have not experienced a lot of pain in your life, you will have no idea the mental toll it takes on your ability to navigate life, especially in the world we live in, where there is no room for flexibility for anybody with any sort of disability, mental health struggle, or physical ailment that is chronic pain. So I hear you, right? And if you're sitting here like, Jen, really, you're going to tell me that I just need to accept my pain? That's not what this means. Pain acceptance, as defined in the paper, is a willingness to experience pain and the consequences as a means of fostering a greater sense of personal engagement and well being by not relying on avoidant and control based coping. Let's dissect that real quick. So, pain acceptance really means just being willing to experience pain. That's like the first part. I think that we are in such an avoidant situation and afraid of pain and avoidance of discomfort in general that we are not willing to accept pain as part of a being a human. It's just part of the human experience. Pain's going to happen. And so for some people, it may happen more often. For me, it definitely happens way more often than Ryan. And I could kick and scream and get pissed about that all I want. But at some point, you have to reach the stage of acceptance and just know that that's just the way things are. And I just have a smaller margin of error, of self-care, of things that I have to do than Ryan does. And so I have to be really strong about my boundaries setting. And I have to be really strong about the things that I do and understanding myself and making sure that I communicate that to other people. And if you are a recovering people pleaser, that's going to be really hard because it was for me, but it's possible. So, not just because I did it, right? I don't ever want to do that because I have some privilege that a lot of people don't, but it's just possible because most people are not even asserting any sort of way of addressing this. And, a little bit goes a long way, right? So acceptance to just feel and experience pain, and the consequences of pain, right? Like the stress and things like that. Because it can be a way of fostering a greater sense of personal engagement and well-being. For me, my pain has forced me to go down a really large self-development journey. I've had to go through and really learn boundary setting and things that maybe other people didn't have to learn as early on for me. And sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll be like, I didn't know you were so young. I'm turning 30 very shortly here. And they don't think that I'm that young, often because of the way that I communicate or talk or carry myself. And I think that's just, or because I'm really good about boundary setting, and that's something people don't learn or realize or aren't forced to figure out until later on in their lives, when some other shit hits the fan or they just start to realize that that's more important to them. I've kind of been forced to figure this out early. And so because of that, I do think it's like one of those blessings in disguise. And again, I don't like to rainbow paint over like problems, right? Because they suck, but there's merit to that. I'll talk about that in a minute. They talk about that in the paper. But just understanding that it can create a platform for you to really learn a little bit more about yourself and learn about all of these biopsychosocial factors that really aren't just about pain, but really affect our overall whole entire sense of well-being and health. And if you're experiencing pain, those are the things that are going to affect it the most, right? So it's pretty cool to see that and have this validated in research articles. The other thing in that definition was not relying on avoidant and control-based coping. So that's the third thing that I wanted to cover when we talk about pain acceptance. Sometimes when I work with people, they come in my office and they really want me to fix them. They really want this list of exercises that are the answer. And very often, the movement is part of the answer. Do not get me wrong. But I really offer a lot of tools and we do a lot of talking to help them realize that this is part of the answer, but all of the other things are important. And if you do the exercises, I don't tell them they're guaranteed to get out of pain because quite frankly, that's a load of bullshit, right? Like if a clinician's telling you, just do these exercises and you'll never feel pain, they're lying. Maybe they believe it and they're lying to themselves and they're lying to you, but it's bullshit. So what is really important to understand is exercises and movement things can really help you move better, first of all, so you can have more ability to do more things like physical freedom, but also to feel better, feel a little less sensitive, have less inflammation, things like that, and have a higher pain tolerance. That's a big thing for strength training and exercise in general. So what I really want to focus on there, though, is just that we need to kind of make that mindset shift with some of my clients or patients that we are not going to avoid pain. It's not going to happen. It's this white elephant in the room. I think that's the phrase that nobody wants to talk about. Pain's there. It's going to happen. I just want you to understand better ways to cope with it, and having a better mindset around it so that it doesn't become something that's more debilitating for you. And I think that can be really important mindset shift. And I can tell that there are some people who definitely are more avoidant and more control based. They want to control the pain, control their lives. Hello, that was me. This is why I had so many issues with the pain that I experienced back in the day, because I just wanted to get rid of it, right? I wanted to get rid of the pain. I wanted to fix it and I wanted to move on. But like, I've accepted now that it's just going to be there and it's going to flare up at times, and I can almost predict when it's going to happen based on what's going on in my life, because I've really had to take that journey over the past 10, 15 years. So 10, 15 years, by the way, that's like how long I've been really working on this stuff. So be patient with yourself. The thing that I want to also note about pain acceptance is this means that you're going to have less worry about the pain itself, and then you can focus on the external parts that need to be addressed. So that means that when you experience pain, you're not afraid of it. You understand it. By the way, I'll keep throwing this disclaimer in there. I don't want you ignoring some pain thing that you feel that something's going on and you need to get it checked out. Like, this is something a healthcare provider should be working with you on, but as long as you've had things ruled out and maybe you've seen other healthcare providers, this is where we can really get that better connection with pain. I just wanted to put the disclaimer out there. Very often, something serious isn't going on, but it always helps to make sure that you have somebody validating that nothing super serious is going on. Sometimes that can actually make you feel worse because you're like, no, I feel something serious in my body, and something is going on, but it doesn't mean that there is like something like a heart attack or cancer, those like really worst case scenarios we tend to go to. It usually just means we need to address things from a bigger scale and take a bird's eye view of our life. So that's kind of what I wanted to put there for a disclaimer. But having pain acceptance just means that then if you can stop worrying about the pain as being this problem, and then you hone in on this pain and this pain and this idea of trying to escape the pain becomes this thought virus, instead of doing that and trying to then follow up with all of these control-based and avoidant-based things, like you feel something tweak or almost tweak, you panic, assume the worst, grab NSAIDs, start to rest, limp, or just like hobble around because you're afraid. Now we're really creating a lot more fear in our brain, and we're reinforcing that body part is weak and fragile, and our brain like can recognize that, right? So if you're reinforcing the idea that oh yes, you are right, brain, this is fearful, then what else is going to happen? Your brain's going to be like, oh crap, yes, let's like make this even more like hyper aware, hypersensitive, I am fragile. And then that kind of gets worse over time, and then you're just like barely able to do anything without this like little tweak feeling popping up, just because we had this mindset of fear around that area. So when we can be less afraid and not let that like fear thought virus take over, and instead go down okay, so I had a tweak there. Let me get into my logical brain, right? Like, let's get out of the emotions of the fear and let's go right into logic. What just happened? A lot of the things that I'll tell people is if they had a tweak, check the thought virus, right? Make sure that we're not giving that fear thought virus a platform. And the second thing is, can you move it? Like, if you just felt a tweak, just slowly move it around. More often than not, if you're slowly moving it and you go back into that movement a little bit and it was fine, then it was just a little tweak. And then from there, let's zoom out real quick on that day, the day before, the last several weeks. Is there something going on in your life that's like maybe creating a little bit more sensitivity of the area? So if you are in a position or doing a movement that you do every day, and one day it tweaks, or sometimes it tweaks in a dozen others, maybe just figure out, like, did I not sleep very well last night? Is my recovery not very good? Have I really increased all the volume of exercises I'm doing? Have I moved? Have I had a big change in my life? If you think about the idea of fear, the opposite of fear, so the idea of fear really facilitates pain in our body. It's a perception of threat. That's kind of what pain really is. If we think about the ways to combat that, it's kind of grounded. It's feeling grounded and safe and secure. So if you have a big change in your life and you don't have maybe the best ways of coping with stress and all of that, and you're kind of generally not super grounded, then all of a sudden maybe you're going to feel more tweaks and more pain. And I know that like when you experience the pain and the tweaks, it can feel like something really physical is happening. Trust me, I get it. With my neck, that was what happened, and I wouldn't be able to turn my head, and I would be in tears many times depending on how stressful my life was. The amount of stress I was in would be highly correlated with the severity of the flare up in my neck. And it would last a little bit longer, and it would be pretty awful. And it would really affect my life. And then also the amount of stress globally that I've been in for many months highly affects how often that flare up will happen and how much I would tweak my neck. So that's been my experience. And so this is what I help people do in the office, is just take a tweak happens. Let's take a zoomed out bird's eye perspective and figure out what's going on. Am I getting in an argument with somebody that I care about? Maybe your significant other, and that is somebody who normally feels really grounded for you, and that's like a secure relationship you have. That's that whole relationships actually affect a lot of that too. And or maybe like you just don't have a strong sense of community anywhere, and so that's like the sociological aspect. There are so many things that affect it, but like look at what's going on with your life, and if you don't know and can't make those connections, that's where a clinician, like a solid coach or clinician, should be able to kind of help you. And sometimes this is why I spend 30, 45 minutes in my sessions talking, because these are the things that really matter. This is what helps facilitate that pain acceptance. So again, that's what pain acceptance means. It's just being willing to experience the pain, and then knowing that like it might help you foster a sense of like personal engagement and better well-being, and rely less on avoiding and coping, control-based coping, and you're just overall less worried about the pain itself, and then instead we're focusing on the external things that we can address, like maybe my relationship with so-and-so wasn't really good. So that's a stressor for me. Let's resolve it. Let's just see if we can resolve it. Maybe you can't, maybe you need to go to therapy and resolve that together. I don't know, but like address that. Maybe you just feel really unsettled because you switched a job and you just need more rest and recovery. Maybe figure out some ways that you can add more parasympathetic type activities in your life that help you feel a little bit more grounded. Maybe talking to somebody and having a little bit more social support is really helpful. Maybe reaching out to a friend in that way and saying, hey, do you have a minute? I am feeling a little like I need a little bit more support right now. Like those are the things that you can start to do to affect change. And those are just like a few examples. There's so many ways that we can do that, but pain acceptance just means to start focusing more on those types of things and affecting change there than being so afraid and focused on the fear and the pain that you're experiencing. People who have higher pain acceptance scores will have lower pain catastrophizing, better cognitive, social, and occupational functioning, and it plays an important role in their quality of life. So when you have higher pain acceptance scores, you will not again hone in on that pain, which we call that pain catastrophizing, which just means not to be really negative, but like dramatizing this situation, right? And this isn't you as a person. This is something I did and I will do if I'm not paying attention. It's just feeling like this is affecting your life and going down this whole, like, this is terrible, I'm afraid to do anything. Like, catastrophizing just means letting that thought virus kind of grow, right? That's how I like to think of catastrophizing. And when we're thinking about that, we want to try not to, we just want to try to have higher pain acceptance scores so that we can not go down that road of catastrophizing. It really helps us get out of our emotional brain into more of a logical type of brain and situation. So those are the 3 factors that I loved that I wanted to cover, because I just found that so fascinating, because it's definitely things that I cover with my clients and those that I work with, and those who are able to go through these types of mindset shifts and just really work on having a different mindset, be a little bit more aware, start to understand their emotions a little bit better. That was something that was actually covered in the article too, is just being more self-aware and like having better emotional regulation or emotional awareness specifically is super important for being able to recognize and address pain, because that is very much tied and correlated with our psychology and our emotional resilience. So hopefully that can kind of give you an idea. I'll highlight one more time what those 3 things were. So number 1 is definitely going to be, maybe we should quiz you and see if you could remember it. Number 1 is going to be optimism, right? So optimism is just not that toxic positivity, but just understanding that things get better in the future. Number 2 is going to be having a purpose in life and really understanding and having a strong belief in purpose of life, just feeling like you're purposeful or knowing what that is, that a lot of times will have to start with just getting to know yourself a little bit and a little bit more self-development work. And then number 3 is pain acceptance, which we spent a long time talking about because I feel like it's one of the things that is definitely needed in our society when we are very often sometimes very pain avoidant and fearful. So those are the 3 things that you can maybe start to consider. If you are somebody who experiences pain a lot or you work with people in pain a lot, you can kind of start to work on those things. But I hope that kind of highlights how important it is to start to understand your psychology and really work on self-awareness and like emotional intelligence and learning your own emotions and learning your own self. And I just really loved that paper kind of highlighted that because this is the work that I do a lot with my clients and didn't really know exactly how I was doing it. But oftentimes as a clinician, I didn't realize how much coaching I would be doing. I thought it was definitely just like I'm exercising with people all day. I'm just giving them exercises and teaching them exercise and it's really cool. But that's kind of problematic if I thought that, because that just goes to show my experience with physical therapy and my experience with shadowing and my experience with school was really focused on all of those biomedical things. And I really would like to see more of a shift in understanding that when you are working with people in pain or in this realm, you're really working on and essentially just being a rehab coach, which is kind of what I call myself sometimes. So, hopefully that was super helpful and you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a review, share this with somebody who needs to hear it, and or reach out to me. I love hearing what you thought of the podcast, and if there was any like really big things that you enjoyed, or even if you just really liked the podcast, let me know. It gives me an idea on if you want to hear more of these or not. So thanks for listening, and I will see you on the next one.